apparently this should be going to all of our platforms. We'll see here. Just gonna I'm gonna reload this really quick, just see what's going on.
Yeah.
And okay. Hopefully, we get a few people joining us here momentarily. I did send it earlier, the link earlier, but usually it takes people about 5 minutes to join us.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Most of the time I do this, it's during the evening. So it's like, this is like middle of the day for people. So it's a little different. I was hoping that we might get, like, sometimes it's easier to get people on their lunch break to join us. So I figured maybe we'll try this and see what works best here. All right. I don't know how to see if this is actually working, but I'm going to assume it is because everything looked good.
Yeah.
Oh, yep. Okay. We're good. We are live. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I mean, we can just start talking about it then, and just while we're waiting.
Sounds good.
So you said you're heading back to Brussels. What's keeping you busy lately in terms of are you doing a bunch of consulting? Are you actually building out these models with different companies? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I just came off my spring speaking tour. That was part of April all through May into June. So I have kind of two tours that I take. I take a spring tour and I take a fall tour. So I'll be back on the road in the fall for speaking, but in between I am heavy on consulting and building a couple of things right now, which is fun. So for me, when it comes to consulting, I work a lot with companies in terms of their responsible AI and governance practices, which I describe as basically I'm the human side to all of their AI. So I'm working on the training. I'm working on responsible AI workflows. I'm helping navigate tricky situations where half the team doesn't understand AI and the other half has maybe too much understanding of situation. So that it's a lot of pieces in between there.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you seeing? I mean, with the clients that you're working with, what are some of the biggest challenges and questions the organization different organizations have?
Yeah. Right now, one of the biggest questions and challenges that people face is actually around the use case of AI and validating business value. I'm seeing that across the board where we have the need to be able to understand why are we investing into this in the first place. You've got some companies going all in, and then you've got a lot of other ones holding back. So finding that balance there.
It's funny because I'm finding that the companies that are like really gung ho about it are like the ones that should be are the most risk averse. They're like, oh, we have to jump on the AI bandwagon. And you're like, whoa.
It comes down a lot to actually the people internal. So you get a lot of influence from the company culture for sure, and the industry that they're operating in. But then it also depends, do they have someone in-house that gets the technology, that is pushing it, that is advocating for it in a senior leadership position, that can put budget behind it as well. This is significant investment that that companies have to make.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges I have is trying to figure out how to communicate that. Because you get executives who really, really want to go, they're like, this is the next thing, we got to get on it, or we're going to be behind, we're not going to be able to compete. And then, but they don't, this AI is expensive. It's not cheap. Like, this is not the computing of old. It's not like you can just throw up a VM somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Welcome, Amy. Welcome, Michael. So we might as well get this party started. So thank you all. We are live. So for anybody who would like to join the conversation, I have thrown the link out there, and you are welcome to join us. But we have with us today Olivia Gambelin, who is an AI ethicist, one of the pioneers behind responsible and ethical AI. So she sees this stuff every single day. She is also the author of a lovely book called Responsible AI that just came and I've just started digging into. Already hooked on it, so it should be a good read. But we are, we're preparing for Olivia joining us at CAST 2025 this year in Salt Lake City, August 25th through August 27th, as our keynote speaker. So she will be opening the conference, and as well as doing a really cool experimental workshop with us, figuring out how to apply your ethical models to the quality space and the testing space, and working together with quality engineers in that. So Olivia, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us today.
Thanks for having me, Gwen. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. And then we also have Michael Barsinai, who is also a speaker at CAST this year, and is the CTO for Provango. And then Amy Knapp, who is a longtime pal and colleague, who she's the GRC queen, as I like to call her. And she's actually going to be joining me at Zion's here in the next little while. But glad to have you guys. Welcome to the conversation.
Oh, thanks for having us.
So Olivia, so to open the conversation up, we were talking a little bit before. One of the things that I found interesting just in the introduction and the first chapter of your book was that, only 20% of AI initiatives will be successful because of a lot of different factors, but one of which is really understanding what the problems we're trying to solve and the use cases. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what you're kind of seeing in the industry today and some of the challenges that organizations are facing?
Yeah, absolutely, Gwen. And I feel like I should start calling this like the dirty little secret to the AI industry, that not a lot of AI projects are successful, that it's a mass amount of investment into something that has a failure rate of 80 and in some places 90%. Seems ridiculous to put that much investment into something with such a high failure rate.
Yeah.
But the challenges that businesses run into quite often, they come in all shapes and forms and sizes, but the biggest one that I see is really around that use case design. What's our need? What are we actually addressing here? And that manifests in so many different directions, because that can come down to, if we don't address that, we don't know if we have the right data, or we don't have the right model architecture, or we haven't actually created a user interface that a business unit that needs this system can actually access and use. So it turns into all of these different problems if you don't actually know your starting problem, which leads to high failure rates. And then, of course, too, I come from the responsible AI space. Governance is a huge factor within that. So the responsible AI governance factor, that's all about making sure that you have best practices in place to keep the engine moving forward, but that you have the human factor in there as well. Because at the end of the day, it's that human machine interaction that we're looking for. I think something to add a little bit more depth as well to that statistic around the 80 to 90% failure rate, having that is only failure rate for a system and a model not making it into production. So not going live, not being used. You then have the 10 to 20% that do make it into production. They are live, but they are often caught in this lack of scale. So it works for one or two people, or it works for one team, or it works for one specific use case. But where I'm seeing companies struggle even more now is being able to scale beyond that, really more of like proof of value, not necessarily even a full scale AI solution, creating that fundamental change. They're kind of stuck at these little easy projects at the start and little small test cases. So to add a little bit more depth there, now that I'm seeing in the AI space as well, that even once you get into production, even once you have a live model, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are getting that fundamental change that you were going for to start with.
Right. Interesting. I mean, it's funny. It's funny you bring up these challenges. I see a lot of correlation, and Michael, Amy, I'm sure you see the correlation with the GRC stuff, but from a testing and quality perspective, I mean, I think in general, we have faced a lot of the same challenges in technology in general, right? Like, you know, the garbage in, garbage out concept, right? Where if you don't know what problems you're trying to solve, if you don't understand clear requirements, then how are you going to get to the right outcomes, right? And this is a conversation we have constantly within the quality space. Michael, you know, you're kind of, it's interesting. Michael's, well, I will let you introduce the full aspect of your perspective. But Michael is in the AI testing tool side of things, so he brings that perspective. So, Michael, what are some of the challenges from an actual productizing AI perspective, especially within the quality space? What are you seeing? What are some of the challenges that you're trying to solve, and some of the challenges that have come along with that in terms of figuring out context and making it actually do what you need it to do in the end?
I think the biggest problem is really understanding what we're trying to build
Yeah.
and what does it mean to be a successful, to have a high quality system, right? So the system has to act as intended, but then the question is, what's the intention,
Right.
right? And there's also another question. Once you start to ask about what the intention is, there's also the quality of the intention itself, right? Do we have contradicting specifications, contradicting requirements? To have something that, you know, it's like, it's a great product, it's really smooth, like, especially in the banking industry. I guess you get this a lot. Like, here's a really nice workflow that's amazing. It only kind of like goes against a few regulations and stuff. And, you know, some people are going to call us and be like, well, you've been breaching this thing and now we're angry at you. So you have to navigate just by, I mean, forget the implementation, just getting your intentions right.
Right.
That's a huge thing. And for this, you need to understand the legal aspects and the product aspects and the policy aspect, all these kind of things. And it's very tempting to have something else understand it for you. So just throw everything on a machine and then you get something. And it's kind of amazing for me from the QA perspective, because we kind of like, we get paid to suspect computer output, right? That's our job.
Yeah.
And somehow AI came in and was like, we're just gonna give this to ChatGPT and I'm gonna trust whatever it tells me.
Right.
Like, how would this happen?
Yeah. Well, and never, and I think it's what's interesting. One of the things that I found, even in my own kind of, because we're testers, right? We test. So, obviously, like, I'm trying out all different kinds of scenarios. Some of them will be conversations that I'm having about, big life questions and more existential crises type moments where I'm working, like, I'm just curious about how these systems are going to respond, right? And the types of information it's going to give me back, because then I just go into curiosity mode and then I go down rabbit holes. But it's interesting to me, using it as, I've been very, very careful in how I've used it to use it in areas where I'm not blindly just asking it for things that I'm not familiar with, right? So like,
right.
I use it very heavily in doing analysis of industry standards. So I will feed it the data set that I really want, and then I'll have it do analytics on that and provide me, I'll ask questions around that specific thing. And I found it to be really helpful for that kind of thing. But it's a very finite use case, right? When I have gone outside of that and asked it to be more creative, to come up with, testing scenarios, or even at one point I was trying to get it to come up with test questions for a class that I was teaching on cybersecurity, and I found very quickly that it was getting it wrong most of the time. So the responses would be all over the place. In the test scenarios, it would be very redundant. And so it almost took more time to do it that way than just to think about it myself to
Yep.
actually come up with it from scratch. So that's, I mean, I've had both successes and failures with it, but I would imagine, I mean, the stakes go up when you're actually building tools to put out in the market or to solve very real business problems, especially the more complex they get. Have you found that,
Definitely.
Olivia? I mean, has that been something, in terms of, have you seen almost this blind faith, even at the organizational levels, in terms of understanding really the constraints around the technology and, what things it does really well versus what things it's just not gonna be able to do right now?
Yeah, I've definitely seen a mix of that, meaning you have people that are blind faith, and then you have the utter skeptics that will never touch it. So
Yeah.
it's a spectrum, and when navigating that within a company structure, it's trying to figure out how to bridge from two directions, from the overenthusiastic AI has no limits to the underwhelmed and skeptical AI will take over the world and I'm never going to touch it. So finding a bridge that gets between the two.
Yeah.
One of the places I see companies struggle the most with this actually is in procurement of all things. Well, not of all things.
Oh.
It makes sense
Yeah.
because AI is expensive to develop. So I'm
Mhm.
seeing a lot of companies default towards buy before build if they can find a good solution.
Yeah.
Now, when they're buying, though, it's very hard to cut through the nonsense that you get from sales, where there's a practice within AI sales to sell you the moon and forget to tell you that you need to build your own ladder to be able to get to it.
Yeah.
It's not general practice to communicate through that sales process. Here's the limitations as well that we have.
Right.
Versus when you're using a system, knowing those limitations is one of the most important factors to having success in using that tool.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I see this problem cropping up a lot for companies in that procurement, and then just dissatisfaction with a tool once it's actually in place.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's new to anybody on this call, like whether it's GRC tools, whether it's testing tools, like I think test automation suites, codeless, the big one that was out over the last 10, 15 years was, codeless automation, where it was essentially just putting a wrapper, and you had to visually code, right? But you still had to understand code. And so like the learning curve for that was the same, right? Like, and so it almost made it more difficult. So that is nothing new to this world. I think we we have all probably experienced that to some degree. So relating to that, and I know it's funny that, I think in the first chapter of your book, you're like, people are asking the wrong questions of what the top risks are in the industry, as opposed to what the top risks are in what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, as you're working with these different organizations, where ethics kind of plays into this. I mean, what are some of the ethical implications to all of this, to, and some of the things that you're seeing that you're kind of leading some of the conversations around?
Yeah. So ethics works in a lot of different directions here. On one hand, on one layer, we can talk about ethics in terms of actually company culture. So you have, and this is especially important for larger enterprises, legacy companies that have this brand, this loyalty that's been built up years over years over years. That's built off of those company values. That company is making decisions based off of company mission, company values. It has this loyalty because of all of those years of people following and connecting, aligning with those. I usually actually, this company is not tech at all, but I usually talk about Nike here because Nike has such a strong following and they've built a very strong value of that kind of resilient underdog.
Yeah.
People buy Nike because of those values. People follow Nike because of those values. So when Nike looks to implement AI, they need to implement AI in a way that still, again, it both supports but reinforces those values. Again, this is not like AI functions over in a different direction. It actually, you have to align it with those intentions. So even ethics can work on that layer of aligning the technology with the brand, with the company culture, with the intentions and that company mission that have built, especially larger companies over decades or centuries.
Yeah.
That's one way to look at ethics. That's one factor. Another factor of ethics is looking at your end user. So what matters to your end user? And you get factors here like, does this actually work for your end user? Is your end user pulling benefit out of your AI solution or your company service that is AI enabled? Does it work for your entire user base, not just one subsection of your user base? These are questions, again, that deal with ethics. And then we have ones that are a little bit more existential. So what is this doing to humanity kind of questions, but are also equally important. You know, we saw there a paper came out, I think maybe 2-3 weeks ago, and it's still being highly debated right now, but it looked at how users, when using ChatGPT, their cognitive abilities, their critical thinking decreased. Now there's a debate whether or not that study is correctly reflective of what's happening, but it is starting to hit on that concern of, well, what implications does this technology and all of its different developments have for us as humans in this world?
Right. Was that the MIT one? The MIT study?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen some mumblings about that one.
There's a lot of mumblings. There's a lot of mumblings, especially in the responsible AI space.
I bet. What are you finding in that space? I mean, it to me, it's part of the conversation, I think, that's been going on for a while. I mean, and it's definitely a question that I've kind of pondered, like how we are obfuscating things so much, and there's so much abstraction, right? That we're getting away. We're utilizing these tools that we don't understand how they work. And, you know, it used to be that technologists, right, we would operate like we would really dig in and understand how systems worked, right? The inputs and the outputs and the dependencies and the outcomes and how all of these different structures played together to accomplish whatever it is. And so I think that's something that, as coming from the technology perspective, is something that, and especially within the testing perspective, right, is to be a really good tester, you have to kind of understand that stuff. And so now what you're seeing, right, you're seeing the surge of vibe coding, and you're seeing, people kind of hand off the thinking and the cognitive stuff to these AI systems, and just be like, okay, it's good, everything's great. Well, not really, right? Because we're not like, who's checking that, right? Who's validating that that's the right outcome? And so from a quality perspective, there are definitely, like right now, it almost feels like there are definitely more questions than there are answers. And I think, at least for me, and please guys weigh in here. I know for me, it's very unnerving to understand where even to start tackling those challenges. I don't know. Michael, welcome to the conversation. Do you want to do a quick brief introduction of who you are and
Sure.
what you're doing lately, because you're in the AI space yourself?
Well, technically speaking, yes. Well, hi, my name is Michael Larson. I am a development test engineer with a company called Model Op. And Model Op is based around the notion of AI governance. And so we don't necessarily care what models you're using. We just want to make sure that you don't run yourself off a cliff.
Sounds good.
And so that's a lot. And so that's
a good goal.
So that's what our application generally does. As a matter of fact, I'm literally in the middle of doing an upgrade for a release. So I'm kind of taking a small break here right now, but I'm also shifting my brain to make sure that I'm looking at all the right things and that I'm pointing in the right places and not having a database get corrupted while I'm in the process. So try to play tunnel vision for a little bit of time here.
That's all right. Before I let you go, so what are like from your perspective, because Michael actually comes from Michael Barsinai.
That's me. That's Michael.
That guy. He's coming more from the testing tool, the AI testing tool, right? Where you are testing AI. And so what are some of the questions and the challenges that you're thinking about right now? What are some of the things that keep you up at night? What are the challenges that you're looking at trying to address?
Well, honestly, a lot of what it comes down to from my end, and here is the benefit, in the sense that, again, our company is relatively agnostic as it comes to AI models. We don't necessarily care what model you're running. Like, you could be doing an LLM, you could be doing something very dedicated. You can have some simple things that are just doing, I don't know, like, actuary evaluations. Like, models exist for all sorts of purposes.
Sure.
And for us, it's not a matter of, oh, well, we have to do X, Y, or Z with the model. Most of what we do is along the lines of, is the model documented? Is the model up to date? Does the model have some guardrails around it? And there's a big list of, we have a bunch of what we call, like for our product, we call them out of the box monitors, or you can also get some specialized ones. And there's a whole list, and it's become a little project of mine going, okay, what exactly are these tests? Like, Creutzfeldt-Jakob test. What does that mean exactly? And basically, it's a methodology that's used to score what your model is, and if you are within tolerances. And it might just be, hey, guess what? This model was updated 3 days ago, and your most recent version of this model is 2 weeks ago. What's the delta of that? It will say, you don't have the most up to date. In fact, you're out of date by 2 weeks. And that could either be, it's a minor inconvenience to stop everything.
Yeah.
Update your model and run this again. So a lot of it comes down to, I look at things like, what are the monitoring details for it? What are the assets that are associated with a particular model? And how do we make sure that we have what we expect? If we've run tests and we've confirmed it, and we've done an audit for it, do we have that documented someplace? In other words, if somebody comes back to me and says, hey, we've got an LLM that is behaving strangely and we're not sure why, at least they can go back and go, okay, hold on, let me take a look at that. So the last audit we ran was 2 weeks ago, and we are scheduled to run another audit in 90 days. Now, it's entirely possible that that's not aggressive enough. Okay, good to note. Now we can say it's been updated. We've got a detail for it being updated. We update it. We could go back and say, what has its frequency of updates been, right?
Yeah.
Say, oh, we're updating this model every, I'm just picking a random number. We're updating the model every week. Okay, well, then me having a 90-day update is not going to be good enough, obviously. But some models may be, like for some more conservative financial models, 90-day update is perfectly normal.
Right.
But another example might not be. So you don't want to rely on that one test. You want to have something else that does it. You want to make sure your scheduling is working. You want to make sure you're getting the values you expect. And also, as you're walking through each of the steps, you've got a way to make sure that what you're putting in place is accurate, it's correct, it's documented, and it's reported.
Yeah.
So that people know that that's the case. In other words, it's really important for us to make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's, because we're literally the governance of that.
Yeah. Important stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
If it comes back and says, well, this thing's out of place, and it turns out that our audit was not effective enough, or that our documentation lapsed someplace, that's a problem for us. And so those are
and a problem for everybody using it, right?
Yeah, it's a problem for everybody using it, exactly.
And ultimately, it's on them. It's it's their responsibility to make sure that.
Yeah, and the real challenge is also that we have, without going into too much details, otherwise this is going to turn into a infomercial for Model Op, and that's not here. If you want to check it out, by all means, go check out modelop.com and play. That's fine. That's all I'm going to say about it. But my point being is that as you are looking through these things, we basically say you can define whatever you want your guardrails to be. In other words, if you want to say, we want to make it so that you can schedule a certain way, we want to make it so that you look at who are the beneficiaries, who are the supporting people, who do you call in case of emergencies. You literally have that listed, and so that you can do so. And if you need to change it, you can do it. Just recently, we went through a pretty big update specific to internationalization. Had a lot of fun with that, and working with particular contractors to make sure that we get our language right, because it's not just enough to say, hey, ChatGPT, go ahead and translate all of these prompts for us so that they are in the correct in the proper language. Or for that matter, hey, Angular, go ahead and run this through your data pipe and just change the locale. Sometimes that works great. A lot of the time there's things that get lost in context.
Right.
And
Right.
especially if you're dealing with a language like Japanese,
Yeah.
that really has some interesting variations. And if you get them wrong, you can get some kind of embarrassing, ooh, that's not good. So again, what keeps me up at night, making sure that we're communicating well, making sure that our application is keeping track of the things that it needs to, making sure that the software itself is performant, behaves itself, doesn't get wrapped up in a lot of things, and ultimately doesn't fall out on you and prove to be ineffective. So all the classic test stuff still applies with AI.
Right.
And especially if your product isn't necessarily AI itself, but it's something that helps you manage it.
Right.
And then it's just like any other product that you've ever played with.
Interesting. Well, at least in that use case, right?
Yeah. Your mileage may, of course, vary.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a good caveat to your world, Amy. I mean, from a GRC perspective, right? Like it is GRC is, and I think one of the things that has been so nice about having you on some of these conversations is that you bring that compliance side of the world to the quality conversation, because from a quality side of things, it's always like, regulatory compliance, like all of that has been out there and it's been kind of at the side, even like we've been in parallel kind of paths, right? But from from your perspective, what are some of the things that are being talked about in the GRC space and the implications there? Uh-oh, I think you're on mute. Testing. Are you on mute? Is it just not working?
You hear me now? But,
oh, there we go. That's
Okay.
better. We can hear you now.
Sounds good.
It doesn't want to use my other microphone, so I'm just wearing these headphones for no reason. And now I'm staring at the wrong screen. So, this is technology at its best. So what I was trying to say, 5 years, they're still on mute, is the fact that we're in a world where the people testing and governing this technology don't know the answers. Like that's the biggest part, is it's brand new for everybody. So we're building in an environment that we don't know. We are either being highly cautious, as Olivia said, or overly confident in the technology that's being delivered. So you've got a very wide scope. And to Michael B's comment earlier about defining exactly what you're trying to do with the technology is like a big piece of it. But a lot of the directives from organizational leaders and the people who are really positioning the AI as the thing that we can't get behind on, but we already are, but we can't get even more behind on it, is that they just kind of push you towards it and hope for the best. And so security, governance, risk, compliance, and testing, we're all playing in this field where everything is evolving really fast, but we're trying to keep an eye on everything while still enabling the business to go forward in some way as to what they're doing. And we've seen it before in a lot of aspects, like you brought up, codeless testing aspects and other things like that. Like automation was touted as the new great thing that's going to change everything about the universe. And it can, but it needs people. And so the aspect that we're seeing is that the way that humans process what is about to happen or what should happen, or in this case, what do we do, is still very vital to the aspects of the success of AI. So it's more in terms of how can we utilize AI actions to support automations, which will then kind of drive us towards where we're going. And that seems like the more safe space, but it's not as high shiny as saying we're going to use AI to go to the moon, which is effectively what a lot of people want us to say. So we're in that struggle of we are, and this is the same for like security in general, is that you're learning the new threats as you go, which means there's going to be a lot of failures, which means that companies need to be a lot more comfortable with the fact that we are going to fail, which means you need that concentrated area to fail, not Microsoft Copilot leaking data failure. So it's like that too, where it's like you're going to find these big holes and you're going to find them fast, and you don't want to be that person, but you do want to make sure that you're doing the right things, doing your checks and balances. But there's so many elements to it that the biggest challenge right now is just trying to get your head around the scope of how your company is using it, how your systems are using it, what those models are. To Michael L's point, I'm just going to call you L&B now. You're a law firm.
That works.
And like there's just so many moving pieces, and so some of the people that you have in these roles that you're expecting to utilize AI just won't get it. They won't understand why they have to put some guardrails around it, why they have to be very prescriptive about how they're going to use it, what gates are opened and closed in terms of the environment that you're using it in. And then there are other people that will really get it. And then there will be the people that get it that don't want any restrictions, and people that get it that want to hold back. And you're going to have to basically navigate this unknown world of possibility, but with a lot of accountability that's going to come along as well. And until we start seeing from an ethical standpoint the outcomes, like even just from an environmental impact aspect, like there's a lot of people that just won't go to AI to ask X because they know it's costing this much in resources. And I used to be able to work this out by myself, so maybe I'll just do that. Versus people who are just flippantly wanting to utilize it for everything. And there has to be that fine balance. It feels very similar to just a general aspect of utilizing resources and money to do things that perhaps you probably should have done yourself, or the aspects of like effectively AI models are slaves right now to the human wants of whatever we want to create. So, be it images, be it art, and then you've got the fighting element of AI art versus actual creation from people, and there's just so much. And that was a very long answer. There's a lot going on, and I'm not sure how you rein it in. Like there's just so much to it.
Well, and so there are a couple of things that come to mind as you're saying this stuff. One is that you were talking about kind of the evolution of automation and how critical that is. And I think one of the concerns that I've seen in over the last, I would say 5 years, is that teams have struggled just with the automation piece, right? Figuring out what automation actually means and where automation adds the most value, right? Like, I don't think a lot of larger organizations and enterprises that are really, really complex have really figured out how to do that well. And yet, to your point, because AI is happening, like because these advancements are happening so quickly, like in order to keep up, the only way we're going to be able to keep ahead of it is to have the automation in place to do a lot of the monitoring and the real-time checking to make sure that that these systems aren't being used inappropriately, or that they're not leaking data, or that we're not introducing security risk to our organizations. And so like that is it's very interesting to kind of see us kind of go into this age of AI where we haven't really even figured out the automation piece of it. And it's almost like, I think Olivia, you were kind of getting to it earlier, where it's like we're trying to run before we've even crawled yet in a lot of these areas. And so I'm going to take that and I'm going to pose the next, I'm going to drop the big bomb here, which is everything we've talked about is around, how we ensure that these systems are doing the right thing and that we're being ethical, that we're being responsible. But the reality is that there are forces out there and there are humans out there who will use this for unethical things. And I guess my question to you is, what are the kinds of conversations happening about that?
Yeah, that one's really hard because it is, there's only so much that we can do to prevent misuse of AI. It will always happen. It will always exist. I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realist on this fact.
Right.
And life exists on a spectrum. Everything exists on a spectrum. So we're going to have misuse, just like we're going to have really good use of AI. And it's more, I want to say there's probably two factors here right now that at least I'm really interested in. First comes to regulation. Now, I'm not very interested in regulation. I'm very interested in regulation's role within this space, meaning regulation is designed to catch that bottom rung, the bottom rungs of people really abusing. And I don't think we are at the point where we're able to do that yet. We're seeing some attempts like the EU AI Act, but there's a lot of confusion around the regulations that we do have, and then the lack of regulations that we have. Now, regulation, if you are compliant, this is what I always tell clients, if you're compliant, you're one step above illegal. Congratulations.
Right.
Good job.
Yay,
That's
good
it.
job.
Yeah, exactly. That means nothing in terms of the ethics scale.
Right.
Actually, the relationship between law and ethics is quite interesting. So ethics is very contextualized. We have to figure out and adapt to each and every context. Once we find a commonality that applies across all contexts, then we move that into law. So ethics is kind of that ability to adapt to context before an experiment and understand what is the universal law that gets applied then.
Yeah.
That's what we start to see move into regulation to catch that bottom rung. So that's a factor that I'm looking at in terms of being able to help control the misuse of AI. But then the other side to it is, frankly, we need to rewrite our hero stories when it comes to AI. When we're talking about the companies that are leading in AI, we talk about companies that we also say they may be leading financially, they may have large stock options, but when it comes to actually, is this how we want our technology to look? No, we're not going to put those two in the same sentence.
Right.
So, but we're still talking about those entrepreneurs and those companies as like, wow, this is the mark of success in AI. Frankly, I think that's a load of crap. I would call those companies marks of success. I would call them great examples of some misuse of the technology. So defining what it means to have success in AI when, as a company that uses AI for the betterment of people, of its users, of its employees, and so on. That, to me, we need those hero stories because they do exist. We just don't prioritize them. We don't have them as highlighted as necessarily the few ones that do it really bad.
Right. Well, and it's funny.
And then you could have this interesting case where someone would ask ChatGPT, "Hey, what would be a good use of AI?" And then ChatGPT say, "Well, OpenAI are doing a pretty good job, right?" Or if you ask Claude and say, "Well, Anthropic are like."
Exactly.
So
Get a nice little echo chamber.
if you outsource understanding, there are inherent risks that you can be. Amy said before that the AI is a slave to humans currently, but you could think of reversing, like certain role reversal, especially if you have malicious user on the other side, right? We had there was all kind of talking about if you're asking certain models about the Tiananmen, all kind of happenings that have political significance. If you ask the Chinese models, they might answer different things than US models, for example. So it's people you still need to have your own understanding, keep your agency, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, just this week, right? There was the Grok incident with Elon's, on X, you know, some glorifying Hitler in one of the, you know, like it went the opposite direction, right? And so they like the, you know, we haven't even delved into like the kind of the nitty gritty of ethics and responsibility within the AI space, but like this kind of goes into that is really kind of looking at the bias right now, and how you adjust it, right? You may adjust it one way, and then all of a sudden it's going off and doing something completely the opposite of what you want, right? And so, and this is out there. I mean, and I think that's a concern that I have, like, especially from a quality and from an ethical and a responsibility standpoint. Like, that's scary to me that these tools are just out there. Like they're freely, well, not freely, but they're available to whomever wants to use them. And so, you know, Olivia, I think that like there is a lot of scariness to that. And I mean, you know, I could pick your brain for hours in terms of how you went down this path personally and what kind of the driving factors were for you to get into this. But I mean, I can't, like, how are you kind of approaching some of those bigger, like, massive, like, risks and massive threats at the societal level, right? That come with this?
Yeah, actually, I've got, when you asked Gwen at the start of what am I doing right now with my summer, what in the world, where in the world am I and what in the world am I doing?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm building right now is actually a course on AI literacy for non-technical people. Specifically because most of the people that I run across that have a lot of these fears, that are avid users of AI or want to be, they don't come from a technical background, and they've been told for years that it's too technical. You'll never understand it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest lies I've ever heard.
Right.
I'm not technical. I don't come from a technical background, but I can sit at a table full with the top engineers and CEOs and thinkers in AI, and I can pull my own weight. I can hold my own because of the foundational knowledge within AI. You don't need to understand the technicalities of ins and outs of
the algorithms.
The algorithm. Like you don't need to know. You don't need to know how to program a Bayesian algorithm. No. You can understand what Bayesian theorem means and what that applies for the information that you're interacting with. That's a completely different level of understanding. And anyone can access the foundational knowledge. And for me, that's a huge contributor to these risks, is the lack of understanding of what it actually means, because we're being bombarded with all of this, frankly, PR stunts about AI over and all these bad things are going to happen, and we're going to have these overlords, and now we have AGI. And if you don't have any understanding of what AI actually means and what's going into a system, what it means to have good, clean data versus unstructured chaos, what that means for a system, how different training actually influences outputs of an algorithm. If you have no understanding of that, and you're being hit with all of these different scary stories or technology that you don't understand, then there's a huge risk to actually not intentionally misusing the technology. Is actually unintentionally. Yes. Thank you. That's a very important word. Unintentionally misusing the technology just by not understanding its limitations or when or how to use it, or what technology doesn't fit your needs or misaligns with your values. There's this veil that needs to be lifted. And that, one of the things that I'm working on there is that AI literacy course for non-technical people, hopefully starting to lift some of the veil, but there's a lot of work to be done specifically in that direction.
Sure. Well, so that's a good, I mean, I'm very grateful that you're in that space doing that. I think it will be something to keep an eye out for in the coming months, because I think there's such a need for it, even within the testing space, frankly, right? Because you do have quite a large number of testers who wouldn't necessarily call themselves technical. And so you start talking about some of this stuff, and it's scary, right? It's like the big monster in the closet. And suddenly you're responsible for it.
I mean,
So,
Glenn, there's so many times with my clients where I'm like an AI whisperer. I'm going to put that in quotes. I'm like an AI whisperer where, just the other day I'm sat down with an AI provider and a legal team for one of my clients. And the AI provider is talking about all these bells and whistles, and I'm watching the legal guy freak out. He's like, what do you mean? I don't understand. Where is this going? What's happening? And I'm sat in between trying to translate between the two and even just communicate what the AI vendor actually means over to the legal department and calm them down quite literally to go, okay, don't worry. This thing that he said doesn't actually imply what you thought it did. And let's actually get on what's happening and deep breath. Don't worry.
Right. They're thinking all of these liabilities that they need to like write into disclaimers.
Oh yeah. That is a slippery slope that could get going pretty quick.
Oh yeah. I think, I know that I've been involved in some of those conversations internally in the banking area, right? Like, because legal is obviously sitting here going, okay, where do we even start? Do we need to bring in third parties to help us with this? What do we need to do? We have to fix this now.
Yeah.
So it's good to know at least there's some, like, maybe the monster that we think isn't necessarily the biggest monster that we're expecting. However, I would imagine that there's probably some unknowns that will, as everything evolves, as everything progresses, it will be interesting to see what comes of it and where the risks and where the threats end up coming from. Because like so many things, it's probably going to be where we least expect it, which is a little scary, I think. I know it is for me anyway. Yeah. Well, so to that point, we have CAST coming up. We have barely scratched the surface of this conversation. Do you want to give us kind of an overview of what you're going to be covering both sides of it, both from a kind of a research discovery perspective, as well as kind of sharing your insights with testers. What are the heavy hitting topics that you're going to be kind of honing in on for CAST?
Yeah. So I've got both the keynote and a workshop. So the keynote is, we're going to be focusing a lot specifically on what is a tester's role in this entire equation, because everyone has a role to play when it comes to, I'm going to phrase it as AI done responsibly, because you can either have risky AI or you can have responsible AI. There's not really any, I know I was talking about there being spectrums. Those are the ends of the spectrum. You've got
right.
a bunch of risk and cost, or you've got it actually doing it well and having success. So what is a tester's role in that? Because it is specific. I know Michael L. was talking a lot about that. Exactly. A lot of
present.
Exactly. Present and accounting for. Was talking a lot about post-production maintenance, which oftentimes people forget that that's a huge factor. We have model drift, and we have all of these challenges. We have model drift, we have ethical drift, we have technical and ethical debt that gets caught up, that catches up to us, especially once we're in post-production. So as a tester, what do you actually need to know? What is your role in being able to help support that maintenance, considering that maintenance is such a critical part to AI success? So that's starting to scratch the surface. But I guess the 10,000 level, the 10,000 foot view is, what does it mean to do? What is the goal of responsible AI? What's the value of doing it? And what is your role in actually having success there?
Awesome.
That's more on the keynote side. And then the workshop side will actually be doing something called values-based AI innovation. And this is one of my own frameworks. It's one that I've been developing for a couple years now, and I'm just now starting to trickle out into the world, which is fun for me. I'm excited to actually be able to do this live. And values-based AI innovation is specifically looking at creating and designing AI use cases in alignment with our values. So instead of saying, let's tack on values afterwards, let's tack on what matters after, we actually start with the values. We start by sitting down and going, what matters at the end of the day in this instance? And using that as the epicenter of innovation, having that
Awesome.
dictate, well, this is how AI is going to work best for us. It draws on something called ethics by design, which is out of my AI ethics background, but it also draws a lot on human-centric design thinking, which is really up and coming in the AI, especially the AI use case design.
Sure. That's awesome. Well, I know I'm looking forward to it. I'm getting more excited by the day. So cannot wait. And everybody I think on this call is going to be there. So we'll all be joining you in Salt Lake City here in August. So yeah. So, well, we are coming to the end of the hour here. Olivia, is there anything, I mean, from your perspective that you want to leave people with in terms of things to think about moving forward, questions to ponder as we're kind of encroaching on this massive, step forward from a technology perspective?
Yeah, I think, there's so many things I'd love to say. I would love to have people question their needs, meaning, I say this a lot. I say this a lot on stage. I'll probably say this on stage for the keynote as well. So not every solution has a problem. In AI, we have a tendency to look directly towards the technology. We're going to find, like, here are all these great solutions. Great, they're solutions, but what problem do they actually address? And when it comes to AI, both on your personal life, professional life, both in your professional and personal life, but then also as a business, knowing your need, knowing the problem, and having a full, holistic, comprehensive view on the problem before you actually try and retrospectively fit a solution, an AI solution to it. Knowing that need is, I would argue, probably the most important factor to finding success in AI. So I guess a challenge would be for everyone listening in to pick one use of AI one instance of AI that they use in their daily life, and see if you can walk it back to actually getting to your base need. Like, why are you using this? What problem is it solving for you? Are you using it because you don't want to be left behind because it's kind of cool and shiny? Or is it actually addressing a problem that you have that you now have a solution for? So personal or professional, pick an AI tool.
It applies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can actually walk it back to your need.
Awesome. Good advice. And now I'm thinking about all the times that I actually use it and go during the day and go,
Yeah.
what problems am I trying to solve?
I'll give a very quick example here to highlight a little bit of it. So an instance that I use AI in is I'll switch between ChatGPT or Claude. Those are my usual two victims. But when it comes to writing, I am an author. Now, for me, I don't use AI to write any of my material because my need when it comes to my writing is actually for me to explore the topics myself and expand my voice and dive into the creativity process there. That's my need. AI does not solve that need.
Right.
I solve that need. I don't need AI there.
Yeah.
However, I do need AI. I do use AI in marketing and sales because for me, I get too caught up in wordsmithing.
Yes.
It really doesn't matter when it comes to getting a one-pager out there. I need information out there. I don't need a story with intricacies and word choice and so on.
Right. You don't need it to be your voice authentically.
I need something I need something that just communicates, that will get across the point. And usually it'll take me hours to write a one-pager because I'm so caught up in that wordsmithing. So my need there is actually time management and communication on simple marketing factors.
Yeah.
Great. AI actually does solve that need. So I use AI there. And it's that kind of difference that I'm talking about.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I will say I have found similar uses for it, especially with the AST work. So, those aren't all my words in a lot of cases. So I know, shock and awe.
I'll do it. I know.
Well, awesome. Well, I know, personally, I'm very, very excited to meet you and have you speak on these topics. I think it will be very enlightening. I think I'm going to learn a lot. I'm excited to be there with everybody. And thank you so much to everybody for joining the conversation today. It's been very insightful. And yeah, just like getting me that much more excited to hear the rest of it. So yeah, so until then, we're going to sign off, but thank you all and have a great rest of your week. And if you haven't yet, go get Olivia's book. There you go. See, I did a plug for you. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. Good one.
All right. Thanks all. Have a great time. Have a great rest of your week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.